Jonathan Simon, who is in the process of setting up so I can talk about him. Jonathan and I go back to the 2004 election. He's universally known as the man who downloaded the Edison-Metoskey exit polls, which, again, those of you who follow that, the universal laws of statistics only apply worldwide, but not in Ohio. They're deadly accurate and used by our government to verify elections throughout the rest of the world. So, Jonathan Simon, of course, is the man who went online and also the man who wrote Code Red as we look at the corruption of polling in the United States. And he now will be talking about WeCountNow campaign, which he sees as a sea change in vote counting and public participation. And because of Jonathan, I did sue Edison over the exit polls, arguing that they were a state actor, since no matter how implausible the things, they will always adjust. So instead of looking at the instrumentation, right, the technology to see if the machines are acting up, they simply go, that's totally implausible, let's accept it. And the last speaker was absolutely right. I actually took a case, you have to prove by clear and convincing evidence, and what the judge said we proved is that there's no way to verify any election, because the voter verified paper tracks were put upside down, all tore up, and no one could find half of them. So, we proved conclusively no one knew. And the man who started it all, Jonathan Simon. Okay.
All right, well, while he's doing that, I kind of want to begin with just a sort of state of the electoral union, very, very brief and non-political state of the electoral union, which is fine.
Here we go.
Okay, thanks. And you know, where we are now relative to where Bob was talking about in 2004, I mean, my first, sort of dipping my toe in, went back to 2003 at Suffolk Law School. Ron Rivest was there along with a lot of MIT colleagues talking about, how we could have what he's going to rig in the 2004 election, and we're talking about something that might be ready in 2028. And that got a few murmurs, a lot of applause, certain, it was a strange concept because we were in academia and it wasn't down and dirty in the gutter. And now here we are 17 years later, or 16 years later, and what I would say is, positive about the state of the electoral union is how far we've come in terms of recognizing what the security issues are, recognizing to a large extent what the political game is, getting people involved more than they were to at least think about ways. Because if it's not a system we can trust, it's also not a system that Donald Trump can trust or foreign countries can trust, and elections become very, very sketchy projects if people lose trust in the system. And a big part of what's gone on in the last 17 years has been, well, don't look under the hood because it could undermine trust in the electoral system. And wouldn't you know, from a potential rigor standpoint, that works out very well for them because we were so scared to look and undermine that voter trust. So now we're in a place where there's a lot of battles going on. I mean, there's a kind of, a front, there's machines, or whether we're going to have RLAs, or we're going to have some other form of audit, or nothing at all, or whatever. And this is being fought in all sorts of states. And I have to say, the state of the electoral union is, from where I sit, is pretty awful. Because although all this stuff is happening, I mean, there are not 50,000 of us here. This is not the Oakland Coliseum. It hasn't exactly swept the country with the fervor of the temperance movement or the suffragettes or even the civil rights movement or even the gay rights movement. I mean, we are a small particle. And we are fighting that trench warfare, and we're not fundamentally winning, or this WeCountNow idea. For me, I mean, in a way, it's going back 3 spaces, because it's about hand counting and being, participants in the electoral process and in the vote counting process. And of course, we were talking about hand counting in, 2000, 2002, and 2004. And there was a lot of arguments about whether, the solution had to be hand counting or it could be some form of audit. Remember the Holt bill and everything. And I like RLAs. I'm not. This is not about hand counting versus RLAs. What this is about is the role the public sees itself as playing in our democracy. Active versus passive, owners of it versus spectators of it. So WeCountNow 4 Hours for Democracy. We did basically, federal and statewide races. It would take 4 hours per voter per lifetime. So once for 4 hours. I've already served 12 days of jury duty. So, that is basically 24 times as much as 4 hours. So it would be a very, very, very small burden. And so I'm just going to look back at, when we were hand counting about 1980, there was, still about, a fifth or a sixth left in this country that actually did hand counting. As you can see now, the blue has disappeared. It's pretty much all gone. There are a few places in New Hampshire and Wisconsin, and then of course you got Columbia County, which counts by elections are competitive. But it's basically disappeared, and in its place we have DRVs and op stands and mix. I wish this Pew Research went back before 80, because I remember, that if you went back to like 1960 or so, hand counting was about half of what was going on in the country. So it's evident that we could do it, because in 1960 we had ballots with 25 candidates or propositions on them as well, and somehow we managed to hand count them. But that's gone away. So Judge Rosenberg here ruined it for everybody by allowing that photograph to be taken. That was, of course, the hanging check. Doing this, they're interpreting the punch card or the ballot or whatever. This is going to be a recipe for disaster. And so that kind of helped bury the idea of hand counting. But 2012, we had John Zogby wrote a poll. He asked voters, would you be willing to volunteer, no pay, for 4 hours to serve as vote counters or observers of the count. And by the way, at this point, that would include people doing risk-limiting audits, it would include people observing them doing audits, basically staffing the post-election process. Different from poll workers, different from the people who check you in. These would be counters, observers, auditors. National poll, 57 yes, 23 no, which left a few people who was like, yeah, I don't know. But that's a big majority. That's 57 is a good sample. Represented basically for it, and it went across the partisan divide. This held for Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, all across the crosstabs. And this was before elections mattered. Before Donald Trump, before you had Sebastian Gorka jeering at you saying, elections matter, shut up. And now elections matter, because we are in the equivalent of political total war. And we can remain nonpartisan if we want, but the reality is there's a political total war going on right now. The behavior of the various actors on the scene just seems to confirm that. And that total war is really over democracy. It's not over tax cuts. It's not over, plant trees. Democracies die by Levitsky and Ziblatt. This is how democracies die. And they say we're pretty damn close. And they do not mention a word in that book. These are two Harvard professors, very, very good book. But there is not a word about election rigging in the sense of miscounting of votes. Not a word. Even without that, they're saying we're on the edge. That was before elections mattered. I ran this on Twitter, a very reliable source for random poll sampling. And so 92%, this was a few months ago, said, yes, we'll do it. But there was more than that. I spend too much time on Twitter now. Thank you, Jenny. I spend like 6 hours of each day and lose a quarter of my life. But what I picked up from Twitter is over and over again people saying, okay, I got you. What can we do? What can we do? Just tell us what to do. Tell us what to do. We got to be able to do something. Tell us what to do. That's the message that came through from the people who are at least active and interested enough to be on Twitter. So, we count. Voters and citizens willing to count votes for their country. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have to be a voter. You wouldn't necessarily have to cast a vote to count a vote. You might have an age limit or something along those lines. But basically, anybody that has a stake in the ground in this country. Pledging 4 hours to count votes, observe the count, execute an RLA or some other form of that. Whether it's hand counted or there's a serious audit protocol. When? Now. You know, because we got an election coming up that matters. I think we all, know how serious it is. So, what's the, the selling points behind this? I don't know if you can read the screen. It might be a little hard to read. I'll just read it. Because this is, and I ask you to help me out a little bit. If you were an audience of lay people and I were coming to you, you weren't election security people, and I was putting this out in front of you on a flyer or in a speech or something, give me feedback at some point, if you can, about, is this the most effective way to communicate this? We use computers for lots of things. We kind of custom, some of us hand mark our ballots and then put them in a scanner or mail them in to be stamped. Sometimes there are long lines, not enough computers where they break down. But most of us like the fact that we can just go vote and go home and watch the results on TV or our laptops or phones that night. It's convenient and it's entertaining. This is a media property, right? Decision 2020, Decision 2016, whatever. It's like the Super Bowl from the media standpoint. Recently, though, there's been a lot of concern about election security. Hackers like the Russians switching votes in cyberspace and changing the outcome of our elections. And then we began to realize that the security holes in our elections were so big that it didn't even have to be the Russians. Play to what people perceive, but obviously we realized that before the Russians. We knew that it could be insiders and domestic bad actors, probably before the Russians took an interest. But you want to pivot on the fact that the Russians are now involved and people see that as an external enemy. That is to cheat and take the place of the voters in deciding who would govern America. Trust in our elections began eroding on the left, the right, and in the center, and a lot of people are now alarmed. There's lots of battles going on right now over our elections at federal and state and even county levels. And a lot of little tweaks, some making our elections and vote counting a bit more transparent, some a bit less. And yes, thank Florida and Wisconsin and Ohio, even in New York, Pennsylvania, California, to have an election system that's more rather than less secure, but more of an impediment to those who would subvert it. That is incredibly hard work. It has to continue going on. But there is one proven way we can have confidence in our elections. I left out a sentence, it's trench warfare, and I don't think anyone can say victory is in sight. And I think if we search our souls and look in the mirror, I couldn't see any disagreement with that. But there is one proven way we can have confidence in our elections and their outcomes. Again, counting the votes of critical elections, only we can count that way. So, let's all come together and do that. America needs to restore trust in its elections before it's too late, which means pretty damn soon. WeCountNow is a grassroots, community-based campaign to make it happen. Election administrators seem never to tire, and this is the key point, of saying they need computers to count because they can never find the people to do it. Everybody's, their poll watchers are exhausted, they have to go home, blah, 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 and they're older and all this stuff. As if nobody was in hand to do this. You'd have to go out, and track them down and tase them. And huge assumption about us and our priorities, right? It's basically saying we're passive, we're lazy, we're spectators, we're not going to help. by signing on and letting them know that we are ready, willing, and able to serve as counters and observers. We can show them how wrong they are, and more important, how patriotic and devoted to democracy we are. And not just show the election poobahs, the administrators, but show the country, show ourselves, look in that mirror and say, hey, we're not just passive, lazy, going and watching on TV. We're willing to roll up our sleeves. Why not? It takes 4 hours, by calculation, plus 2 to train, get some training. Once in your life, let the powers that be know we're here, we're ready, we care, and we count. And the sign-up sheet is very simple. We, the undersigned, pledge that we will serve for 4 hours to count or observe the count of ballots of the election held in whatever county or state on whatever date, and we'll attend a training session of 2 hours to prepare us for this work. We volunteer this service to our community and country with no expectation of payment. So, what I envision, this is, I believe, Maoris in New Zealand, I think I got it right, but it's a delegation coming to petition a board. And in color, call upon groups like Indivisible, Move On, and AACP, groups on the right, groups on the left, that have community roots to take these very simple materials and basically go out and sign people up. Farmers markets, door to door, wherever, movies. And you have this big list, a big roster full of people. And you have as many people as you can gather into a delegation. You go up to the election board, make an appointment, present the list, present the delegation, and basically say, hey, you say you don't have anybody to staff an election, well, here we are, we're pledged, cut the crap. Use us. It happened. You get enough people together like that, with apparently carrying kayaks or something, and things happen. This is a petition drive to get Keanu Reeves named Time Magazine Man of the Year. A lot of people coming out for that. These are people hand counting in Columbia County, courtesy of Virginia. Don't look any more brutalized than any of us look here right now. They look like they're doing a job and taking pride in what they're doing. So it can be done. This is, it's not Disney World. It's a Hobbit house, which is about a week to pass sensible gun laws. Some correlation there, maybe. This is the Northern Lights, Norway. They decided to hand count their elections after taking one whiff of 2016 in the middle of the USA. They counted their national election by hand in 2017, and guess which way that one went? Windmills, take us to Holland. Same as Norway. As a matter of fact, they were ahead of Norway in deciding to hand count their national election, and guess which way that went. And with all due respect to nonpartisanship, I just say this as an observer, a historical observer, looking around the globe, and nobody's really done this study, but it would be worth doing, maybe the Harvard City, counting their votes now, and what is happening in terms of the far-right populist surge that seems to be coming across much of the globe, but somehow skipping these hand count countries. Computers are computers, whether they're in Bulgaria or Hungary or England or USA or wherever they are. Computers are computers, and they're subject to the same kind of hijinks. So, WeCountNow.org. The website is still under construction. But what I'm talking about, Bob referred to a sea change. This is what I see. Right now, we're all our representatives. Serious election reform, with all due respect to the C Act, is DOA in Congress. And in most of the states, I have to say, if you're keeping a scorecard, there's, a step forward, a step back, sometimes 2 steps back. It's a pitched battle, it's trench warfare. It is very, very slow vote. We got RLAs in, a few places, Colorado, Rhode Island, maybe Maryland, Delaware, I can't remember, but it's just a few states. This is a slow vote, and we are on a fast handbasket, right? I mean, it's kind of a separate piece in here, but outside the world is moving, and things are moving fast. And I would say, from my point of view, that one reason we're there, a big reason we're there, maybe but for causation, is that we haven't taken care of our vote counting process. We haven't taken care of our electoral process. We've allowed multiple thumbs on the scale. There's voter suppression obviously being a big one, but I don't shun that, and I certainly am not proud of the Democrats. They have not covered themselves in glory. But the reality is that there's been a political veer in this country that is correlated with the age of computerized vote count. You just can't get around that. Something is going on in that cyberspace, and there's every indication that what's going on is taking us further into the age of Trump and everything that brings with us. So I just think it's an urgent call. What we need is a sea change, and we need the public to become active and to become participants and to sort of feel that, roll up their sleeves and feel their muscles and say, hey, we can do this. We can participate in this democracy, we can select sample, but I think that is probably reflected. I'd love to run another national poll, and maybe we'll get somebody like Zogby to do it, but I think it's reflected across the board that the recognition that elections matter and that we're losing trust in them is very strong, and if we give people something they can do. So the idea is you go community by community. I already got some people out there that are taking, I have out on the table there, I have sign-up postcards that you would bring to, let's say a farmer's market or somewhere where people are congregating or door to door, so people can sign up and pledge to do this. Recognizing that boards of elections are not going to say, hey, that's great, come on in and count the votes. I mean, Virginia might, and her co-part, Jay Moons, we want something we can program, the vendors program for us and make it simple. But that's the point. You've got to put this on the map, that we want to take back some control over this. So you go with that delegation, and you go with those rosters, and you get it on camera, and you make it viral. And it becomes part of the national conversation. And for those who say, oh, well, we got 63 races in Alameda, granted, we're not going to wind up hand counting 63 races, but we can sure as hell hand count the presidential race, and we can sure as hell hand count the federal races. There is a maximum, including the presidency, of 3 federal races on any ballot. In 2020, it'll be 3 or 2, depending on whether there's a Senate race, and that's it. This is, responsible for a huge amount of what's going on in this country right now. It's who's sitting in the White House, who's occupying Congress. We can do that. I mean, we can count the races that really matter. Not that, your local dog catcher doesn't matter, but let's be real. Who's in the White House, especially if it's Donald Trump, matters. And we can hand count that race just as easily. That's one race. We can hand count it just as easily as they're hand counting races in the Netherlands or in New Zealand or in Germany or in Norway. And we've got to make this visible, public, and get people to begin to recognize that they have this capacity and insist on their right to perform this duty, because that's really what it comes down to from a standpoint of democracy. So thank you.
Certainly endorse what you're aiming at, and even as an intermediate step to getting these people for this limiting to do the count for that, that's a good first step for a full count. But in the interim, 2020 is approaching, and as you know, as we talked before, that for instance, North Carolina was most likely, but high probability that there was that malfeasance. And the exit polls clearly showed that, and they have validity. One, do you know, is the media consortium going to use, are they going to do it again, or are they going to post it so you can do the forensics like you did before, what is the exit poll companies saying we did it wrong in the suburbs, et cetera, et cetera?
That's one reason why I've turned in this direction, because for the last 70 years I've done forensics, and unfortunately, we don't have control over what Edison Metofsky or whatever consortium does. They split off, and in the last election now there's Catalyst going, and then the Fox News thing. We don't have control of that. We don't have control of how they manipulate the data. We don't have control over what they post. We do the best we can, I call it following after the electoral circus with a pooper scooper, and trying to figure out what the hell happened. Generally, when we present that, people who don't want to go there will just say, you don't have any proof, the exit polls must be off. Given the fact that trust is certainly sliding, you might expect them to not, to sort of back off from anything that might be controversial. So maybe adjust the polls prior to public posting. I've been expecting that for a long time. And the fact is they keep adjusting polls, they keep posting polls that whether they've been a little adjusted or not, they're way off from the, from the vote counts. And not just are they way off, but they're selectively and targeted way off. They're way off in the states that frickin' count. And in the other states, they're slightly. The national poll in 2016 was within the margin of error. It was 1%. And then you go to Wisconsin and it's 5.9. You go to Pennsylvania, it's 4.7. You go to Ohio, it was 8%. You don't really have much control over or input to that process. I want to see us go in a different direction. One more question.
And this is sort of a question comment. Have you been following at all the situation in the United Kingdom where it appears that for the first time during Brexit they used vote collation software, at least in Scotland, and so although they do hand count at the polling places, I guess it's almost sort of equivalent to maybe a central tabulator, and this is causing a lot of, sort of a counterpart over in the UK who's doesn't have nearly the back of the community planner, but she's really freaking out about this because it's a company called iDocs that collation. Have you heard anything about this?
I've heard a little bit. There's only so much time in the day, but this is why. It seems incredibly Luddite to talk about hand counting. RLAs don't sound so Luddite, but I think it seems like a step backwards, and yet. We've come to this place where not just in the United States, but all around the world, really we're in an era where I think it could be fairly said, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right? Whether it's the Tour de France or you're talking about Major League Baseball or whatever, they test all those players constantly for drugs, right? For performance-enhancing drugs, because they saw that if you don't do that, they all shoot up, and you still have the same competition, but they're all, erythropoietin. So the default position is that, who would want to steal a U.S. election? Who would want to steal Brexit? Who would want to say? And obviously, there are people out there there's huge stakes involved. We all know that, but the vast majority of the public hasn't thought it through to that extent. The more they get involved in a process where they're actually stakeholders, even if they're just peons, even if they're just coming in for 4 hours to count the votes, you still get a certain pride in the system when you actually participate in it, or you volunteer to participate in it, even if you're not chosen, and then you start paying more attention to what is being done to that system to subvert it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.